Hi you guys, welcome to Skill 9, Factoring Using the Greatest Common Factor. So we're going to start this by recognizing that a greatest common factor, or a GCF, is the largest positive integer that divides evenly into all numbers with zero remainder. So let's go ahead and start practicing that on this slide. What is the greatest common factor of 2 and 14? So when I think of this, I break down 14 to 1 and 14, 2 and 7. Those are the only things that go into 14. If we look at 46, we have 1 and 46, 2 and 23. So the largest factor that they both have in common is 2. If we tried this for 15 and 33, we would see that the greatest common factor that they both have in common is 3. So I want you to go ahead and pause your screen, do this for these 3 numbers. So pause your screen, go ahead and try this. We'd have 125, 5 and 5. 15 would be 115, 3 and 5. 50 would be 150, 225. 5 and 10. The largest one they all have in common is this 5. So our greatest common factor would be 5. So now we're going to factor these. If I look at 12 and 24, the greatest common factor is 12. So you can think of it, I am pulling a 12 out of everything. So I can think of it as dividing everything by 12. 1 plus 2x. If you need to check yourself, so this is our answer. But if we need to check ourselves, we distribute the 12. And we end up with this. 6 and 2, our greatest common factor is 2. So if I divide everything by 2 is a way to think of it. 3 plus u. So these are a little different because now I have to do by the number of constants that we have. And the number of variables. So let's just look at 7 and 10. The greatest common factor. So I have 1 and 7, 1 and 10, 2 and 5. So our greatest common factor is 1. And then m squared and m to the 4th, our greatest common factor is going to be m squared. Because we can think of this as mm, mm. 2 m's is the greatest thing they both have in common. So the greatest common factor is m squared. So if we combine them, is 1m squared. So let's do 12 and 16. We have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. So our greatest common factor is 4. We think of it as x squared and x to the third. So this is 3 x's. This is 2 x's. The greatest they have in common is 2 of them. So our greatest common factor, that looks awful. 1 second. Our greatest common factor is 4x squared. So this one's getting a little bit more work because there's more factors. So let's just do the 28 and 12. 2 and 14, 4 and 7, so we'd have a 4. From our x to the 8 and x squared. Greatest common factor is I have 8. And I have 2x squared, so the greatest they'll have in common is just 2 of them. U to the 5th and u. The greatest they'll have in common is just 1 u. So now I'm going to combine this, this, and this. They both don't have y, so that's not going to be one of the GCFs. So now we want to identify the greatest common factor and then factor that out. So if we go off of our 20 and our 8, and then we have our so our overall greatest common factor is 4x squared. So when I factor out a 4x squared, I can think of this as taking 20. Oh, sorry, this should not be an x. That should be a c. I end up with 5c minus 2. Go ahead and pause your screen, try this one on your own. Our greatest common factor here is a 2 and 1n. So we can factor out a 2n. So I factored out a 2n. End up with 3 minus 2n. Okay, last slide. I want you to take a second and identify what the greatest common factor is of 21 and 6 is going to be 3. Of my u's, it's going to be just a single u. And of my v's, it's going to be a v squared. I cannot factor out a y to the 8th. So now I'm going to go ahead and divide each of those by 3uv squared, 3uv squared. And that's what we would end up with. If we go ahead and pause the screen and try this one on your own, we end up with a 6, a uw to the 4th, so we divide everything by a 6. And we'd end up with that. So this is our introduction to factoring, and it's factoring out with the greatest common factor.